Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the IDK WTF I'm doing podcast. I am David B.
Anastasia Button, and today we are going to be talking about your relationship with money and sales. So the reason why I added this to the docket of things we should talk about is I was one of those people that was able to bring in the people to talk to you and have a sales conversation with, but couldn't make the sale and couldn't make money. And it all had to come to my relationship with money and my fear with money. So I feel like that's going to be something that everybody can relate to. Am I wrong here?
No, I absolutely think money is one of those weird things, right? Because there's so much stigma around it, and there's so much like energetic weight with money, and so many scripts that get imprinted on us as children that we grow up with. And I think it's so apparent, but it's not an easy thing to break those internal scripts that we have.
Absolutely. Because, I think your upbringing with your parents is where at least the experts say it all starts, where you either have too much, you have too little, or there never seems to be a good harmony with money. And I think that's a good point. Childhood scripting just keeps moving with you into adult life. But nobody really talks about that, I feel like, when we're kids. It's like, by the way, this is how I've been acting with money and probably what you're acting with money. And by the way, you should fix that. And so it doesn't screw you over in the future, because it really can. And, it's something interesting because I think it also affects relationships, especially if you're entering into a partnership. It affects business. It affects business partnerships. It affects all sorts of things. And we don't talk about it at a younger age. In my house, money was just like, you don't talk about it because we didn't have it. So, how were you brought up with money, and has that transferred into your adulthood, or did you just change that?
Like, I was always told as a kid, we don't have money for that. That's too expensive. So there was definitely a place of lack. And we didn't really get presents for anything except Christmas. Even though I'm pretty sure, the house that I lived in, the family I was with, were successful. He was a doctor. And I think she was a nurse, and she didn't end up having to work for a while. So I feel like they had to have had money, at least been okay, right? But it was never, budgeting wasn't discussed. I did get an allowance as a kid, but not a very big one. And so there was more just a lack of conversation around it and a lack of education around it. And whenever it was talked about, it was just that's too expensive. We don't have enough for that.
Interesting. So it sounds like your parents were very fickle.
Very, yeah. So on the mom's side, her family was farmers, so I'm sure it was that very frugal mentality, do it yourself, you save all your pennies. And then he came actually from Africa, and so it was the same kind of thing. He came here to get an education to become a doctor, which he did. So, but yeah, it wasn't really talked about at all.
And that is something that is widely talked about too, that I definitely resonate with, is generations of money problems, right? So it's this act of being really fickle, especially with your grandparents, because they really came into that era of kind of just outside of the Depression, probably, and that's that era where everyone was holding onto their pennies. And so that was my grandparents too. So they were little kids in the Depression, so they were always holding on to their money, even though when both of them passed, they had millions of dollars in the bank account. And so it was and they didn't want to pay an extra $2 at one restaurant versus the other,
Absolutely.
But, we didn't even know how much money they did. They did lots of investments with Apple and things like that when it was brand new. They had all these investments and they were really smart about their money. Did they share any of that knowledge? Absolutely not. So none of the next generation got it, and so neither did I. And so it just kind of money just wasn't talked about because there was a lack of, in terms of mentality of money. So did your upbringing came with lots of this idea around lack about money? Has that really did that transfer into your life when you became an adult?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, because again, I moved out early, right? So I specifically remember we had one class. It was a math class about finance, and they were talking about compounding interest and buying a house, and just how much more money a house costs because of the compounding interest over the life of the loan. And at that point, I made a decision. I was like, oh, well, credit sounds really stupid because, like, why would
Yeah.
anyone just pay more? And I made a very conscious decision at that age to just never get a credit card.
Mhm.
So I got one credit card freshman year of college because they push it down every college kid's throat. They're like, hey, get free stuff if you get this credit card. I ended up maxing it out. Um, I did pretty good. And then I didn't have money for a little bit, so I maxed it out. And I was like, oh no, it's free money. Then maxed it out, closed it, never paid it. So I had that on my credit and no other credit until almost my 30s. So I
Mhm.
had like a 500 credit score because it was like anything that was on my credit was bad. And but it was pretty much empty. And
So,
so,
how does that affected you going into business?
I mean, one is because I'd never used credit, it made me more resourceful. So I'd need to find the money somewhere to do something because I'm always just paying the cash out of my budget, right? So we talk about the Millionaire Mindset course and their levels of finance in there. I'm a spender. So I will spend every dollar that I have. So if I have $10,000, I will spend all 10,000. If I have 100, I'll spend 100, but all my needs will be met within that budget, within that range, right?
Mhm.
So that at first was really hard, but I went through a severe, uh, just a personal credit rebuild because as I learned like I need it, I dove in, I learned how to send the letters, negotiate payments, get things taken off my credit report, and get my credit score dramatically increased. So I learned a lot through necessity and way 15 years later than I feel like I should have learned it.
I learned it 15 years after everyone else learned it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Even
One,
when starting business, there's not a lot of books out there about money management, really.
mhm,
It's just get the cheapest things or find the cheapest labor or do it all yourself until you can. But there's not a lot of talk about how you actually manage your money when
mhm,
starting your business or
mhm,
even in the middle of your business.
right.
And there's just not a lot of literature out there that they really talk about that. There's a lot of personal in terms of like get the life insurance policy or, however you're going to work your money in money markets and stuff. But
Mhm,
again, it's like there's very little knowledge out there that I've seen when it comes to really working your money to do the best for you
mhm.
while you're building your business. Although I did know one gal who used to do it. She doesn't even do it anymore because no one wanted to pay her for it.
Yeah, right.
But and they're like, "Why would I pay you to basically be my, CFO, chief financial officer?"
Absolutely.
Um, and she was doing that for the longest time, and she had some really good tips. And I actually interviewed her on my own show back in the day, and it was awesome what she was saying.
Mhm.
And I was like, "You would have been really valuable when I started my business." Oh my
But here's the thing:
god.
would you have paid for that service at the beginning?
Well, I wasn't making any money, so I would not have. No.
And I think that's
Right.
a huge issue is the people who need that help, they can't pay for it, right?
Exactly. So it's one of those things where it's almost I would have paid for the CFO before I even started the business, really.
Mhm,
I think that would have probably been smarter to do. But I know my issue was really with sales and not necessarily finding the people who wanted my stuff. It was how can I get them to actually give me the credit card,
mhm.
And that comes from my own traumas.
Right, and because you had mentioned that, like, there wasn't a lot of money growing up, so there's kinda that scripting of, well, we don't have money. So when you're going to ask for the sale, that mental script was, well, they probably don't have the money either. Would you say that
Um,
was accurate?
Kind of. I just didn't know how to hold a sales conversation. And I didn't know how to package things. That's another thing. If you
Mhm,
don't package it to make sense, people don't want to buy it. But for
okay.
me, it was this money trauma of, yeah, there's a lack of money in the house because I mean, I cannot eat canned green beans, powdered milk, or spaghetti sauce ever again.
Yeah.
If I have one of those anytime in my lifetime, it's way too soon. And so I like definitely avoid those things. And so those traumas, I guess, led me to feel like I couldn't accept money because I never was able to have lots of money.
Mhm.
And whenever I did get good lumps of money from like inheritance, like from my dad, when he passed, his life insurance actually gave me basically $25,000. And I put it towards my book, which was great.
Mhm.
But the rest, I didn't invest it. I didn't use it correctly. And I basically just used it to live on while I was trying to figure out how to do sales for the whole year.
Mhm.
And no one bought at the same time. So it was just this like, I didn't know how to really manage funds correctly to really serve me because it's a piece of me. I was just trying to get by. And I feel like that's been something because I know my mom, she would say things like, I just need to get right with God and then money would be better.
Mhm.
So it was again like she was feeling like she wasn't put together well to
Mhm.
receive money. Therefore, she wasn't getting the money. And
Who
so
who
that's
is
what
this?
I was
Sorry?
hearing, my mom.
Your
So
mom. Okay.
that's what I was kind of telling myself is that I'm not right, therefore things aren't put together.
Mm, that's so huge. That like putting that value of if only I was more worthy, I would get more money, you know?
Right? Which is total bullshit.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
like, oh my gosh.
And but so you were kind of hearing that all the time growing up from her,
Oh yeah.
and it kind of imparted that on you. What was the point you were able to separate that from to get your sales conversations better?
I hired a coach.
Okay.
And that was the person that basically confronted my relationship with money. And once I really understood that, I was basically having sales conversations with people, and I was, well, in my mind, I was convincing them to
Mhm.
buy my product
Mhm.
rather than showing them all the value it has and say Visa or MasterCard and
Yeah.
assume the sale,
Mhm.
right? I mean, you read people, but basically assume the sale. And so when I was just like, oh, so it's basically owning your product, saying this is exactly what it is. Here you go. And are we going to pay with Visa or MasterCard? It wasn't even a
Mhm.
yes or no question.
Right.
It was just Visa or MasterCard.
Okay.
And that was just so assertive to me. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so assertive. But
Okay.
literally, after having that one training, it was actually a back to back conversation. Like, yeah. So I had a conversation with her, and then I went and had a sales conversation with someone else on a totally new package I had created,
Mhm.
modeling her thing actually like the day before. And in terms of structure of how to create a package that people would understand, and had the conversation with her, and she immediately bought. So I literally went
Mm.
from $0 to making $5,000 within just a period of 24 hours.
Okay.
It
Real
was
quick,
so powerful.
what was the what was the final straw for you to go get that coaching? What was the like what
Well, let
was
me
your
see.
I
I
know
was sitting on that nail that you talk about, right? Where the
yeah,
dog's sitting on the nail.
yeah.
And I was in so much pain after being like going through 200 sales conversations in 1 year and not one
Mhm.
person bought. And then I was trying something else and no one bought. And I finally said, what I'm doing is not working. I
Mhm.
need someone to literally sit me down and show me how to do sales conversation. But it took a long time for my ego to get out of the way to finally
Mhm.
say, I have a problem with sales and I need
Okay.
help.
Do you remember the moment that that happened?
Not really, but
Mhm.
I do remember that it was very quickly from the time I was going to look for someone to help me. When I remembered my friend Leela, who she went from 0 to 100, just like what I described, and she was making no money for about a year and a half. And then all of a sudden, she was just like, making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And I was going,
Mm.
what? So I
Okay.
realized that she would be my mentor because I was like, she's again just a few steps in front of me, and she could really
Mhm.
help me out because I'm pretty close to her leveling up. And so that's the level I need to get to.
So it was you were in a frustrating position. You saw like a colleague who was really close to you that was in that same frustrating position and got through it. And so that's neat because it's interesting because a lot of times, especially when people are looking at the coaches up on stages talking about making $10,000 a month and changing your life and doing this thing, people can't relate to that. They can't visualize themselves making that kind of money. But because you saw someone who you could relate to overcome an obstacle,
Mhm.
you were then able to see yourself do it and get the motivation.
Yeah, but
Does that kind of make sense?
yeah,
Yeah.
totally. But I kind of want to put the disclaimer for those who are
Mhm.
listening is that I had prior to that moment, I had talked to those guys that were on stage.
Right.
I knew those people and some of them personally and had conversations with them over the phone.
Mhm.
So like I knew them because I was on stages and things too. But I just wasn't making money and they were. And so
Right.
it was just like I knew what they were doing and I saw what people were doing and I knew that was not my answer
Okay.
because I had seen it for 2 years and I realized that's not going to work for me
Mhm.
because the success rates of the people in their businesses are actually pretty low. So
Mhm.
I was like, I need to go a different route and I need someone who can have a lot of intimate access with me. So that's why I went with the person that was just a few steps ahead. And I encourage, especially people who are just starting to really start doing that, is people who are legitimately a few steps ahead of you to really go for that.
Mhm. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And it's just, yeah, it's so much better that way.
So did you have traumas when it came to actually having sales conversations?
So me, interestingly, uh, that's a strength of mine
Mm,
because I actually don't see sales as sales, and I think we talked about it. I see it as active customer service. I actually got really good at having sales conversations specifically because of my retail environment. They did a really I was like the nerd who loved watching the training videos.
mm.
Everyone in retail, like it's your first week of training, they sit you down, they say, "Oh, you're gonna hate this, but we have to show you these videos." I was like, "Can I take them home and watch them twice?" And I would legitimately watch them because they're spending millions of dollars figuring out exactly what works. Um, and they're like little tips, like you take the bottle off the shelf and put it in the hand of the customer when you're talking about it, which gives a sense of ownership. And then you
Right.
take it out of their hand, and then it's a fear of loss. And then you
Mm,
put it back on the shelf, and you go through the stages of, okay, here's the program, here's what you can do, here's 3 options. What do you want? And because even with that, I was genuinely trying to help people, right? Because I'm trying to help people through nutrition. But being able to present the information in a very short amount of time, dozens of times every day, with people coming to me. I don't have to go find them, right? So that is the benefit of a retail store, and the difficulty of being like a one-on-one coach where you're having to go like find your customer, unless you have good leads coming in, of course. Um, it takes, and it's not my own product, right? So I didn't. There was a lot of factors that I had to teach me that interpersonal sales communication that someone starting their own business doesn't have the advantage of.
that's a good point.
Yeah. And so,
Hmm.
and with high end menswear as well is something I did in college. So I was selling thousands of dollars worth of suits, and so I got really accustomed to high dollar sales uh, early on, even,
Right.
which but it wasn't my product. It wasn't tied to me, and it wasn't like it was just something I was actually passionate about was menswear. And I was like, "Hey, this stuff is really cool. You could match this tie with this shirt, and you could do this blazer actually goes with these 3 different pants. Like, check this out." And people, because I was excited about it and I genuinely cared, it got them excited, and so yeah, I've always done very well in my retail positions.
Thank you for listening to another episode of I Don't Know What the Fuck I'm Doing podcast.
We can't do this without you, and to reward you for your support, we would like to invite you to something unique.
Go to beacons.ai/IDKWTF POD to schedule a complimentary 15-minute phone call with one of us.
You can also find the link in the description.
We're here to brainstorm with you on different solutions for your business or life.
We want to hear your feedback about our podcast or even just schedule some time to say hi.
Not only that, but anyone who chats with us will get a voucher for $100 in restaurant coupons.
Schedule some time today, and we look forward to seeing you on our next episode.